We bring so many things into our lives with the intention of bringing value to ourselves. But how often do we actually know anything about these things besides what directly benefits us? Not very often. And that's a basic reality when you consider the things in life where we try to extract only the benefit from something or someone else's experience versus taking on the experience more fully ourselves and understanding everything that goes into it and comes out of it. More simply put, that's a basic reality of the disconnect between doing the work yourself and having the work done for you, externalized. And let's be clear, that's a normal and mostly unavoidable reality of life. Not only in modern society where we buy things off shelves whose history is a mystery, but in any collective effort. No one gets by here without the work and efforts of the people around them, communities and nations. We all require each other for the creation of long-term strength and resilience. We can't ignore the need to understand the risks of externalization because it's fundamental in the processes of our life. And what happens in this disconnect when we as individuals don't do the work and gain a better general understanding of the world around us leads to some of the greatest tragedies in the human designed life. These are the all too considerable costs that go unseen and unconsidered so that we can get some relatively tiny benefit for ourselves as individuals. Benefits that are often counterproductive even to our individual selves, because of its effect on our ability to understand the world we live in, yes, but also because of its effect on our ability to withstand discomfort in our lives, and also to continue to be humans, to move around freely and comfortably without pain, to take part in the things that we enjoy as human beings. And benefits that only feel real to us as individuals because we ignore the real physical costs that are taking place outside of our own neurochemistry. A system which, if it were involved, would never allow you to ignore those costs, and it would regulate your involvement in those activities. These benefits feel real because of our disconnection from actual physical wealth transferred in a system, and because of our bias towards short-term survival decision-making, even when that's no longer a threat. Real physical wealth creation in a system doesn't happen the way that we feel benefits individually, and long-term individual mental and physical health often doesn't happen the same way either. These are huge differences in the definition of wealth and benefits because they can lead to entirely different and opposed outcomes. As individuals, we are part of systems, and when the system breaks, we break too. This could be the lead in to almost any topic, fundamental as it is. But today, it's recycling. Recycling is a complex topic, but in some way it's the ultimate test of our understanding of the materials that surround us in our lives of consumption. Can we see the materials in front of us and recognize them for what they are or what they were? Do we understand anything about what happens to them after they leave our lives? And do we see ourselves as responsible for putting them on the right path to get there? A belief that might be closely related to whether we see ourselves as responsible for having brought them into our lives in the first place. Hint, you are. We know from the previous sermon on the trash that there are enough people in the world that see themselves as having no responsibility to create big collective problems for all of us. That's a loss of societal wealth both economically and experientially. That lack of responsibility comes from those who consciously toss their trash out, yes, but also, and harder for ourselves and our psychologies to reckon with, all of us who see trash and pass it by without picking it up. When we have the opportunity to make a difference on something that we think is a problem and that costs us essentially nothing, what happens to us when we choose to do nothing? Listen closely. Reinforcing those patterns of not using your individual power to make a difference when you could is toxic to our psychology, even if you don't recognize what's happening consciously. You're teaching yourself through your actions, which are an outcome of your beliefs, that you are not a person who makes a meaningful difference in the world around you. You ignore problems. You're not part of collective problems. You're special. Other people are the problem. That's a problematic perspective for all of us, but especially for yourself. I can tell you there is some area around you that you can keep clean just via your own actions, and it might be bigger than you think, especially if you're getting out and living life as a human pretty often. That is, not living in your car. Like the pets, you know the car hit piece is coming sooner or later. Compared to picking up the trash, recycling happens on a whole other mental plane. In the United States, where we have no federal guidance or goals on recycling, every local community or state must essentially figure this out on their own. They have to work with and engage their community members to take their community waste and create an end product that either does or does not have value afterwards. And the solution that has taken hold in the United States of America is the one that requires the least understanding from their community members' consumer lives. Not good. And provides the most short-term satisfaction. Warning: single stream recycling. Unfortunately, it's also created the most cynicism among its practitioners and the worst results up to this point. But why? For one thing, because the reality of what we're being asked to do is so disconnected from what we're trying to get done. Why? Because single stream recycling was never designed for the process of recycling. It was designed for ease of collection, streamlining curbside collection by your waste management company. A failure of design that created process debt that we're only starting to have the technology and interest to catch up with 25 or 30 years later. Nearly 3 decades of a broken recycling system in the US. Why did that work? Because much of the recycling was based on externalizing to other countries that hadn't yet recognized the real loss in wealth that comes from the environmental and human health damage in trying to fix the mess from a broken system. Wishful recyclers everywhere put whatever they can imagine into single stream containers in the hopes that by some magic, someone else will solve the problems that they created at their own front door. That's what the box promises or becomes to many. That is part of the design, even with campaigns to educate users on the do's and don'ts of how to use it. That's because when the system feels too complicated for its users, it's all too easy to redirect those frustrations that are tied to our own lack of understanding what it is we're actually doing and dealing with into or onto something else. In this case, it's the hopeful or even spiteful belief that someone else will take on our own responsibility to understand the world that we live in. Danger. Now, those who solely believe or more strongly believe in central actions may shift their blame towards corporations or governments or Wall Street, and of course, all these places share responsibility in the problems. I just called out what I think is strange, that there's no federal recycling standards, but we're talking about me and you here. We're talking about taking the right actions in our own lives, regardless what the other people in the world around us are doing. The actions that you take that you have control over say a lot about the world that you really believe in, and not just the one that you like talking about believing in. Doing is the only way we can amass the educated user base that will end up being the solution to the problem. We can try to solve problems from the top down only, but it's just a short-term fix for a population that doesn't know and doesn't understand, and thus will continue to make naively irresponsible decisions over and over again. We can't avoid our responsibility for the world we live in if we want to make the world a better place for having lived in it. In Sweden, where I spent much of my adult life, we have 6 streams in municipal recycling. It's called source separated. Remember, in an economic perspective, recycling is about creating a marketable end product that will be valuable enough for someone else to buy and reuse it. Pop quiz, hotshot. Do you think there are more opportunities for recycling that material when you begin with that level of sorting, or less? I can tell you the European Union just ruled single-stream recycling as non-compliant within their waste management framework for their member states. The contamination levels from single-stream recycling creates an end product whose quality is often just too low. When we put dirty and wet food containers and sometimes food and diapers into the same pile as our papers and paperboard and then dump it into the back of a truck or otherwise compact it all together and then try to untangle that contaminated mess back into sorted streams, all while needing to hit a pretty high goal in terms of allowable contamination, then you're creating a pretty damn big problem that didn't really need to exist. Remember, single stream was designed for collection efficiency, not for recyclability of the end product. For a long time, we didn't have to think about that because China was throwing their own public wealth at our mess, desperate as they were for more material of any quality. Let's take a quote from the Container Recycling Institute to define what recycling really should be. It's important to understand that diversion from disposal, throwing something away, is not recycling. Collection is not recycling. A product is not recycled until it is made into another product. Broken glass used as landfill cover is downcycled into one use only. Closed loop recycling occurs when a product can be made and remade infinitely, such as recycling containers back into aluminum cans and glass and PET bottles. With a quote addendum that PET plastic, like paper, is not infinitely recyclable at this time, at least not with economically viable practices. If we went back in the past and had just a two-stream recycling process here, separating paper fibers from the rest of the container materials, something some cities and states have done and are petitioning their communities to go back to, then we could already see much bigger potential gains in terms of post-recycled materials and lower costs to our local communities because the general trend has been that people will pay more for it. How your community deals with the trash is a part of where your taxes go. It's a part of our community wealth. Why this becomes increasingly obvious as you understand more and more of the system post-consumer materials operate in. In the last sermon on picking up the trash, we talked about how if we all picked up more trash, we could cut back on the amount we need to pay as communities to externalize picking it up. Well, recycling is the same thing. When we fail to do our part to recycle correctly, we generate more material, which is then headed towards the incinerator or landfills, something that's happening at a higher cost, either because of the loss in material value or because landfill space is limited. If not that, then it's more loss of public wealth as material gathers alongside our roads and parking lots and creates a disgusting mess. And I know you wouldn't just burn the trash in your backyard. Not only does that contaminate the environment that you live in, but burning certain plastics that have chlorine, like PVC, among other items, releases something called dioxins, which are known to be some of the most dangerous chemicals to humans known. Even industrially regulated facilities that burn plastic can't do this completely cleanly. So if you see someone burning trash in their backyard, just know that not only are they poisoning themselves, but they're poisoning everyone around them in their neighborhood as well. So these economic reasons are why we continue to see more and more requirements from progressive states on what must be recycled, because they can't cope with the cost of our trash generation and they need to create economic markets for more post-consumer content. But they also need us, which means each of us as individuals, to do it correctly, or as communities we're hit with fees on the recycling we export because it's too contaminated to become a valuable end product and has to be incinerated or landfilled. This is a part of the story of how recycling in the US was flipped on its head in 2017 when China stopped accepting our bales of recycling. We'd been warned that our recycling exports were of too low quality, they were too contaminated, but we just didn't do that much about it. And China realized that the margins around recycled material under those circumstances just weren't worth the full system costs. Towns that had been making money on their recycling were suddenly paying huge sums to dispose of it. That's what happens when you don't take responsibility for low-level infrastructure problems. Things that we can't afford to not get right and take responsibility for ourselves, because at our current scale, if they go wrong, they cause enormous issues. Among the people that I've talked to in my life, for some, recycling feels prohibitively difficult. And for others, they just assume the box will solve the problem for them. I've fallen into both camps at various points in my life, depending on how responsible or delusional I was feeling at the time. But they both signal a lack of understanding. So much of the difficulty in life comes from the areas where we ask, but why, and don't have an answer or a story. Asking but why in the recycling realm requires an understanding of the material in front of us and the process that governs our post consumer content's life, which, although it is more the same than different across cities and states and even countries, is just different enough to feel like the rules are arbitrary. This is a disaster in the design and regulation of the materials in the products of our life, but also in our ability to come together and work at larger scales. But recycling is a knowable realm in our life. Once we understand the materials and the products and the processes, recycling correctly is actually pretty easy. We make it more difficult than it is. We make it a background or a foreground stressor of our lives by never fully engaging with this lifelong problem. It's a part of our addiction to going as fast as possible in society, no matter the costs, as if our lives depended on it. When in reality, our lives only depend on it because of the costs inherent in the products that we produce as fast as possible without consideration. We need to slow the F down and spend more time trying to do things right. Quality over quantity. We introduce new things into our lives. We don't understand them. We get addicted to their benefits. We massively scale them. And then we realize they come with huge costs that we didn't design to deal with. Meanwhile, something else pops up as the next gotta have it thing, and we scale that up too before we even fix the problems with the costs in the thing that came before it. Our lives get more and more complicated. We essentially give up and decide that we're just going to focus on ourselves, which is a natural and understandable effect of our biological programming for self-preservation. For these reasons, we eat up easy solutions when they're presented to us. To reckon with the plastics flooding our municipal trash centers when plastics were first introduced, the plastic industry came up with recycling. It wasn't really working, but it distracted us for decades because we didn't really want to know. It would ruin our easy, simple story. Along came another abstraction that promised we never had to know, and it increased the contamination of our recycling streams and thus the value of the end products and their market viability for competing against the virgin material products. Why are bottle deposit recycling streams the most sought after and only real possibility for creating food grade recycled plastic? Because the risk of contamination from other materials is near zero, and the cleanliness from not being compacted together with household food containers, broken glass, and all the stuff that never belonged in the first place comes for free. Imagine if all our material streams rivaled that quality. How much better could our recycled materials economy be? How much lower could the cost to our local communities be? How much more attention would we have the knowledge and ability to put on buying products that are made with more responsible packaging because we're able to see it? How much more naturally engaged as consumers would we be if we understood the fundamentals of the world around us? I think the answer would surprise us. I think the benefits from just getting done what you can do now always surprises us. Do what you can do to make a difference now and see what new opportunities that opens up that you couldn't predict. Beyond that, I think ignoring the stream of materials leaving our home is a missed opportunity to acknowledge the stream of materials entering them. We gotta do better. We gotta do better because we can do better, and thus we should do better. At least if we want to be adults that are trying to create and protect something for those that are still dependent on us. To paraphrase Wendell Berry, we borrow the world of today from our children. It never really belongs to us except in a fleeting moment. That's what our acknowledgement of the responsibility in our lives means. That's what being an adult is really about. Making the right decisions via our actions, not just being aware of the right decisions. As I said in the beginning, we're talking about recycling, but we could be talking about so many different things. Apply the how you do anything is how you do everything mentality and set your bar high. Get to know what exactly it is that you're holding when you're throwing out the waste products of your life. You don't shit on the kitchen table, so don't throw your trash in the recycling or your recycling in the trash either. And because I never want to be someone in your life who creates new problems without helping you solve them, the R&D video for better understanding the materials in our lives and how to recycle them is coming soon. In the meantime, maybe go pick up a little trash in your neighborhood or along your favorite trails. Keep working on those fundamentals of becoming a force of good in the world. Peace out.